Welcome. Thank you, Chairman Weller and Chairman Austin, and other members of the board. I came here to talk in support of 5096, but I have to, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to make some comments about Bill 5085. Representative D'Agostino asked questions about some instances where it might be working. Well, in the town of Litchfield, we have taken over all control, including all of the finances for exterior and interior of the maintenance, including any of the custodial. And we saved in the first year $98,000 in the budget. So, you know, let's just, and I don't mean to sound argumentative, so I hope it's not coming across that way. What this bill's all about is money. And what the Board of Finance should have the authority to do is exactly what this bill would address, and that is to manage the non-educational funds that are tied to the Board of Education's budget. And I think that is very important because in our town, when it comes to the budget process, the Board of Education's attitude, not knocking them, they do a fabulous job, but their attitude is, here's our budget, you tell us how much you want us to take out, and we'll dictate where we take it out. And that's all their attitude is toward our Board of Finance is, all your job is tell us what our bottom line is. You don't have anything to say about where we spend our money, how we spend our money, and in what areas we do any cutting. And I see that as, that in itself is not cooperative. And that's where I think maybe this bill, I agree you have to identify specifically what is core educational issues, but at the same time I think it is critical that the Board of Finance do have the authority and the ability to manage the non-educational portions of that budget. And in answer to the MDR representative, what we did was when we transferred all of the exterior maintenance and the interior maintenance over to the town, we contacted the state and asked them if that would have an impact on the MBR, and the answer to us was no. So we were able to move $1,200,000 from the Board of Education side to the town side, and now the town, that's part of our budget. The negative was our budget went up $1 million, and we had to explain that, and the Board of Education's budget dropped $1 million, which was easier to explain. So I just wanted to make a comment that I support the efforts in this Bill 5085. We have happy to answer any questions on that if there's any.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative?
No. I'm just curious, when they switched on to the control of the buildings, because that's sort of like the quintessential example, right? Sure. The janitor's in the building, right? And there's boards of ed that would say, well, I'm not going to give up control of my interior of the building. And there's other boards who would say, thank God, take the janitors and you deal with that. How did you do that? How did you meld the two? Where was there the meeting of the minds?
We had the exterior portion of the building for a number of years. And then we were pushing, and personally it was me trying to push, along with my public works director, and our basic argument was, that's what we do. We do grounds and building. You educate, we do grounds and buildings. Now that took us, we tried to actually get the interior of our maintenance, and I don't know the exact time, but I would say it took us 3 to 4 years to finally convince the Board of Education that it was the right thing to do. Now their attitude is, thank God you're doing that.
Sure.
There's a couple of them who say, gee, we should get it back. And I hate to be negative, but I think it's all about the dollar. But there's a couple who say maybe we should get it back, but the majority of them, including the residents of the community and the parents who go into the school quite often, say that there's been a major improvement in the cleanliness of the school. There's been a major improvement about the upkeep of the building, both inside and outside, and because that's what we do. So it took a while, and it took a lot of meetings. We went through 2 superintendents before we were finally able to get an agreement. The first superintendent said, no way, no how, that's not going to happen. The second superintendent was, no way, no how, that's not going to happen. But after a number of years, I was finally able to get the chairman of the Board of Education to sit down and have some real meetings with us, and we had an MOU that explained what our responsibilities were. We had a guarantee that we were going to show savings, and we also had a guarantee that we were going to show an improvement in the cleanliness of the buildings and the upkeep of the buildings. And then beyond that, we also agree that I have my buildings and ground guy attend one of their facilities meetings at least once a quarter. And then they have discussions about any issues that they might have with the building. So that is what we offer from the town side, and it's working out very well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and I guess I would wonder if there's anything in that process that we could do on the state side to help incentivize that, or would have helped move that forward. You know, things that now maybe think about it and let us know, because it's the kind of thing I think they would be interested in.
Well, I think one of the hesitations is that they are very concerned, our Board of Education anyway, and I would suspect many others, they're very concerned about the NBR. And the first resistance that we had was, oh no, that'll impact our NBR, we're not going to do it. That's $1 million off of our NBR, that's going to be a problem. And so we had to overcome that objection. We were able to overcome that objection, and then once that happened, we got the nod from the state that said, yeah, that's not going to have an impact on your NBR. And then we were able to at least get some conversations going.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I want to commend you for this, your long-term cultivation efforts that have apparently resulted in good quality education with some savings.
Well, thank you, but the one thing that it's not doing is I'm trying to get a combined ledger, and we're in a situation where we have my finance director just left yesterday. The Board of Education has a new business manager, a temporary business manager, that they're trying to hire right now. And I suggested let's get a study together, let's have our auditor come in and do a study, and the Board of Education said no way, no how. But I did convince the chairman that it's either tonight or next Wednesday they're going to have that conversation again. So hopefully we'll be able to at least have a discussion and get a study done to see if it adds value. If it doesn't add value, then it's not worth doing. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, next up is Betsy
What
Garrett.
came for us?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm here to support House Bill 5096, which requires 2/3 vote of both chambers for the implementation of any unfunded mandates. As others have testified, there are over 1,200 state mandates imposed on hometown Connecticut and their residential and business property taxpayers. Relief from these mandates is important to the recovery of municipalities during the biggest fiscal crisis in recent history. Connecticut towns and cities empathize with the state's fiscal problems. Municipalities across our state have enacted painful budget cuts and are making preparations for additional cuts. Deep cuts in services and massive layoffs have occurred in Connecticut towns and cities, with the prospect of additional cuts and layoffs on the horizon. Municipalities must still provide the services residents depend on, such as education, public safety, and infrastructure maintenance, regardless of the economy. At a time when towns and cities are struggling mightily to continue to provide needed services to residents and businesses, meaningful mandate relief is needed this year. Unfunded and underfunded state mandates are corrosive elements that deteriorate critical municipal programs and services and the bottom line of municipal budgets. They're burdensome and requirements and standards imposed by the state on towns and cities that affect residential and business property taxpayers by imposing significant costs. Make no mistake, local officials do not question the merit of many state mandates, such as special education, public health, recycling of reusable wastes, and clean water requirements. However, local officials object when the state does not provide commensurate funding to implement and deliver what these mandates require, and 2, adjust certain erroneous state mandates to conform with the current economic climate. Too often, municipalities in Connecticut are forced to carry out state policies with little or no state funding. It is fundamentally inappropriate and inequitable for forced towns and cities to assume all or most of the costs of policies the state has decided to implement, and thus to pass these costs on to local property taxpayers. In addition, cities and towns lose staggering amounts of revenue as a result of over 70 mandated property tax exemptions from real and personal property owned by the state, private colleges and hospitals. These state-imposed obligations and state-imposed revenue losses force all municipalities to increase their property tax rates. While increasing the threshold required to pass new and expanded mandates or a statutory prohibition would provide serious mandate reform. It must be noted that it does not provide relief from the most onerous current unfunded state mandates. Comprehensive mandates reform cannot occur without significant change in these very costly mandates. And in my testimony, I have a list of some of the mandates that are in place now that I think should be amended if we could. And there's a couple of them that I personally have issues with. And, it's legal notices in the newspapers and prevailing wage. And then my final thing is I know that on January 14th at the COSS Town Meeting Council, Senate President Looney and Speaker Sharkey were asked about passing legislation, unfunded mandate legislation by 2/3 vote and whether they would support it. And both of them made a comment that was basically, I'm not going to quote them per se, but basically said, gee, when we have unfunded mandates, we really review them very seriously. And I would say to you that most, if not all, of the unfunded mandates that are passed at the legislature are done by 2/3 vote. Somebody made a comment, then maybe why not pass it? So that's the way I'm going to end, to say, why not pass Bill 5096 and force the legislature to have 2/3 vote in both houses. Thank you.
Any questions?
So generally speaking, you and I are on the same page in regards to some things, but I think that sometimes people think they're going to save money on what is called an unfunded mandate. And having worked on legal notices for the last 3 years, it's, you know, I'd like to see us save some money on minimizing some legal notices. I do think that you have to have some, I do believe, however, that legal notices should be in newspapers in an abbreviated form other than what they are, because there are people that only read through the newspapers. And I've fought for this with that modification for a number of years now. On prevailing wage, I philosophically disagree that there would be a savings to the town. I think that the only savings that, the only place that savings would go would be into the profit of a contractor to the decrease of the wages of the workers that would work in that environment. That's truly my belief on that. I've had people tell me that some of the unfunded mandates that we have passed have been such as the registration of sex offenders. Because for local police departments, there is some requirement that they maintain and watch the sex offenders. And I suppose that could be considered an unfunded mandate, but it's not one that I'm willing to get rid of. So I think that, I think that there needs to be an honest and serious discussion. And we did get rid of 4 minor, what I would call extremely minor mandates last year. And we will have some mandates that we'll address again this year. But I think that we have to be really pretty cognizant that some mandates, some of them, need to be addressed. But I don't think that every mandate has an ability to profit municipalities as much as they think it may. And having sat down on the 8-hour-long hearings on prevailing wage, I've seen that there's good evidence on both sides of the ledger. I would say that Massachusetts starts with prevailing wage from the first dollar out of the box, a neighbor of ours. Last year, we worked on workers' compensation, which ultimately had the effect of driving down the costs of workers' compensation. According to NCCI, not even according to any of us that sit around here. So, I think that we all are very serious about trying to drive down costs, and I appreciate what you're saying on it. But I do think that it is something, I've put in pieces of legislation that people have said will never go anywhere because it will increase the costs. I do think sometimes we have to spend money on things that are really important. So, at the same time, I'm more than willing to try and squeeze a dime out of whatever rock I can to forward that, and have done that on the local level for a lot of years too. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I would say that we have to be cognizant of some of what what we're looking at for where the real cost drivers are, so. I appreciate you coming up, yep, you can respond, of
Can I
course.
respond?
Yeah, of course.
We agree more than we disagree. My only issue, and I think most of us who are going to speak on this issue, what we're asking is that it require the 2/3 majority vote in both houses to pass those unfunded mandates. You're 100% right, Senator. There are many mandates out there that I have no problems with, and I would say most of my colleagues have no problems with, and the sex offender is one of them. I don't care how much that costs our community. That is an important mandate, and I fully support those types of issues. But the issue is that why not take, and I remember when this first came up in the Moore Commission, when I first was part of the mandate Moore Commission, when I first started, that this issue of 2/3 came up. And my only comment, and I'll say it again here, is that I would rather you at the legislature, and I know there's a lot of work here, you guys do a lot of work, you're very busy, but I would rather you all make sure that you're reviewing and having long discussions before you pass an unfunded mandate that's going to have an impact on the community. And I think you need to have a long conversation and a long debate and long research over how it impacts the New Havens, the New Britons, the Waterburys, Stamfords, and how it impacts Litchfield, Harlington, Salisbury. There's different impacts to different sizes of communities, and even different impacts on the form of government that each one of our communities has. So that's my only issue on the bill I'm here talking about. As to prevailing wage, I understand what you're saying, but my view is this. I had, and I apologize, I don't have it with me, I tried to get it and I couldn't find it, but I asked CCM to do some research for me, and I asked them, not last year, but the year before, I believe, when we had I think there was a hearing, and I think you were part of the discussions we had, Senator, and I asked them to put together a 2-year listing of all of the contracts that the state has, and the state, small and filling potholes or repairing and building new bridges, whatever it had, and there were 2 years of research that I had in front of me. Out of those 2 years of contracts that the state had over those previous 2 years, I don't remember the numbers. This is why I'm hesitant to say it. If there were 200 contracts, there might have been one in 1 year that would have fallen under the prevailing wage thresholds that we've been asking for, and that's $400,000 for renovation and $1 million for new construction. So it would not have any impact, or very de minimis impact, on the state contracts. We're talking about a small community like Litchfield, whose projects, will sometimes range anywhere from $150,000. It's a rare occasion that we have projects that are over $1 million. It's very rare. So where now it has a major impact on us, if we have a $500,000 or $600,000 or $700,000 project, we would not have that 15, 20, 30% increase in the cost for completing that project. So I hear what you're saying. We're just going to agree to disagree on that entirely, because I understand what you're talking about with the workers, and I don't want the workers hurt either. But at the same time, I'd like my taxpayers to have some relief in paying more than what is necessary for a small project. So thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any other questions. Kelly?